Man, everybody hates geography, right? You're probably out here Googling shit trying to get through an exam if you somehow wound up on this video in the wild. Need to know if that blue is sky or water, am I right? Would you like a small cartoon animal to guide you through the tricky subject, US history, border conflicts, how to learn your 50 states? If you're looking for a channel like that, you're in exactly the wrong place. Hi kids, I'm Geography Goat. I'm the kind of person who asks people if they had a nice one when I'm washing my hands in a public restroom. And I have enough stupid geography fun facts to fill an entire, very specific and widely loathed Jeopardy special. I could tell you all about the history of Iran or explain the Ukrainian-Russian border dispute for hours, but those aren't any fun, so here's the story about the time the UK accidentally started a death cult off the coast of Mexico. This is Clipperton Island. Well, it's technically not an island, but we call it that for the same reason we call Greenland green. Clipperton Island is a boring island with nothing on it except a lighthouse and a couple of shacks. It's administered by France despite being within Mexico's maritime boundaries and is used for the sole purpose of boosting that French economic zone, baby! Nowadays, the island is basically just a stop for tuna fishers, even though it has its own wiki travel page for the absolutely mental people who would spend thousands of dollars to charter a boat out to it to see rocks and maybe two rocks if they're lucky. It didn't always used to be that way, though. It used to be a regular hellhole like Jonestown or my frat experience. Let's back up to 1906. You're France, and to say you've been having a rough one would be a bit of an understatement. The British East India Company's annoying little brother, the British Pacific Ocean Company, comes knocking at your door because that tiny island you claimed off the coast of Mexico a couple hundred years ago has something they want on it. It's shit. They want the shit. You see, over the years, seabirds cross over islands a lot because of the whole flying thing, which means uninhabited islands were generally covered in different flavors of bird shit, and unfortunately the story doesn't end with a fun new thing to smoke. This, as it turns out, is a very valuable fertilizer, and can actually condense down into phosphor given enough time, as a certain prison island will tell you. The Brits just wanted the fertilizer though, so they bought the rights to the guano and set up shop on the island with plenty of underpaid Mexicans to do the work for them, along with the reclusive lighthouse keeper that was already there, but didn't do much except jack off and try to punch birds, Victoriano Alvarez. Keep an eye on him, he's important for later. Now, to set the stage, Clipperton Island is a pretty inhospitable place. It's got near constant horrible waves crashing into it from all sides, and even getting to the island can be a challenge. There's hardly any permanent greenery, and the only endemic species of note is the Clipperton crab, which isn't even actually endemic, it's just the highest spawn rate. The settlers' attempt to set up a farm on the island was met by an immediate kick in the balls from God, and they learned pretty quickly that they'd need to ration out the food they got on their bi-monthly supply ship from Acapulco, supplied by the Mexican government. For the first 2 years, this did the trick just fine, along with the occasional coconut and crab on a stick. They even had their own governor, Ramon Arnaud, and his family. It was a cute little micronation, worked like a country but wasn't a real one, like Sealand or Australia. As it turns out, however, feverishly exploiting small islands is not a sustainable business venture, and the British Pacific Ocean Company went belly up in 1908, leaving the people of Clipperton Island without any real reason to be on Clipperton Island. Luckily for the Clipperton Islanders, the ships would keep arriving from Acapulco barring any extreme circumstance. However, without any reason to be there, people were starting to pack up. Soldiers from the Mexican army were headed back to the motherland for mysterious reasons that the islanders didn't get told about because the internet was kinda shit back in 1908. Still, despite it being a harsh island life, it was still an island life, and a good amount of the miners didn't want to leave, given the shipments were still coming in and there wasn't anything that would... It's the Mexican Revolution. President Diaz and his 3-decade reign are over, baby, and because all of that fighting, nobody really had time to sail a boat all the way out into the ocean to feed a bunch of morons doing absolutely nothing on an island. The shipments from Acapulco abruptly stopped, and they wouldn't resume, ever. With their food of choice quickly becoming water sandwiches once the crabs rose up, a lot of the miners and other inhabitants of the island started to realize something was up, before quickly dying horribly of scurvy. The men of the island wound up dying off quickly, on account of them still mining guano for some reason, even though nobody was buying it, and they couldn't use it because all of their seeds were somewhere between Hawaii and Atlantis. There's also a few accounts of some people, notably the men, getting bumped off by a mysterious figure that nobody could identify. Spooky. I bet we don't hear anything about that later. Luckily for the islanders, in 1915 a US warship managed to crash directly into the only island in hundreds of miles. The brilliant minds of the US Navy radioed for help from Mexico, which had colorful language for them, before they sent one of their own babushka doll-style boats within their boat off to Mexico to get some help. Eventually, they came back with the full force of the US Navy, ready to rescue the 30-odd survivors on the doomed mining colony and take them back to the motherland. Governor Arnaud had a hard choice to make. Would he stay on an island where no food could be grown, no boats could easily escape, and a mysterious murderer is prowling around? Or would he go back to Mexico? To be completely fair, Arnaud had technically committed a crime by supporting Diaz's government before the revolution, a crime that literally nobody outside of the island would have known about, but I digress. Why he chose to make the rest of his colony stay there too is beyond me. It took Arnaud about 2 years to realize he'd screwed up, and after losing about half the rest of his colony and impregnating his wife, Tirza Rendon, he made his own valiant effort to get his boys back home. He spied a ship in the distance, and gathering the 4 other remaining men on the island, sailed out into the ocean to find that he actually just saw a piece of driftwood. And then they all died. Just then, the lighthouse keeper re-emerged and chucked every single gun on the island into the sea, except for one. Until now, he'd been a very quiet figure, barely speaking to anyone and not coming out of the lighthouse very much except to grab some more cans of beans and toss his seagull bones every other week. Well, he'd also been the one axing males on the island, with his end goal finally achieved of murder cult harem. Alvarez proceeded to declare himself king of the island in an erratic speech and go on a pretty horrible bender of rape and murder for months on end. He'd gone completely off the deep end, saying things like how he felt the islanders always treated him like garbage, never included him, forgot his birthday before promptly shooting a child in the head. Yeah, this kind of isn't a fun part, so I'm not going to talk about it very much. His reign of terror lasted a few months, with his plan being to assassinate anybody who dared flag down any approaching ships. In particular, his hostage was Tirza Rendon's newest child, born after Arnaud's death. This is because all of Rendon's children were itching to beat his ass at the closest opportunity, including his favorite one, who he demanded show up at the lighthouse one fateful day to be his new concubine of the week. Instead, Rendon was the one to accept his offer of a nice lighthouse date, and quickly ascended the steps to his abode. To say she was tired of his shit was like saying the Imperial Japanese had some interesting ideas about situs inversus. Once there, she exchanged hellos, took his hand, and beat him to death with a hammer before stabbing him 20 times in the chest and cutting his face off. Well, she couldn't have picked a nicer guy. After a long crab-based celebration, the literal next day, a ship came by that they were quick to flag down. 11 people survived the brutal years on Clipperton Island, and since then the place has been uninhabited and largely untouched. I can kinda see why. So yeah, that's where the story ends. If there's any moral to get out of this story, I guess don't take a job mining for shit in the middle of the ocean? Sounds about right.